Hello, my name is Sydney Roper, and I'm presenting a critique on infection fatality risk for SARS-CoV-2 in a community-dwelling population of Spain nationwide sero-epidemiological study. The infection fatality risk is a key indicator for policy decision-making. It is the proportion of infected individuals who die from an infection. Because the magnitude of the infection fatality risk for severe ARDS is still debated, lockdowns and other forms of social distancing have been questioned as the appropriate response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Normally, case fatality rate is used, however, it doesn't include most asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic infections. So population-based sero-epidemiological studies can estimate this number of infected individuals regardless of symptoms and age and sex-specific IFR. The objective of this study was to estimate the total number of infected individuals as well as age and sex-specific infection fatality risk. The primary exposure that the researchers were looking at was COVID-19 positive patients as determined by the SEMA test. The data collection was done by randomized stratification of households, and then all individuals from those households were included in the study. And then serial epidemiological questionnaires and serology tests were collected for all the study participants, and then the death information came from the RENAVE and the MOMO. The primary outcome that these researchers were studying was the infection fatality risk by age and sex, and the secondary outcome was the seroprevalence of COVID-19 in community dwellings in Spain. This study was a population-based retrospective cohort study. The population that they studied were Spanish individuals, and those that were in long-term care facilities or nursing homes were not eligible. The total number of participants in the beginning was 104,605 individuals, and then by the time that the study started, there were 61,098 participants that were given the SEMA test. This slide includes the measures of association and the statistical stability used. These researchers calculated the infection fatality rate and the fatality risk ratios by age, and the statistical stability was done with 95% confidence intervals. The researchers took measures to minimize or control for confounding factors. The study, being a randomized trial, should be a representative sample of individuals living in the country. In order to control for possible confounding factors, each individual was assigned a sampling weight. This would allow the researchers to control for the confounding factors that could influence the results depending on what confounding factors were at play. Local dynamics of the pandemic may have also influenced this study, therefore only residual confounding remains. The major results of this study include the overall seroprevalence of COVID-19 was 4.9%. The COVID-related IFR was 0.83%, which correlates to 2.3 million infected individuals. For excess deaths, it was 1.07%. The IFR for men was 1.11% for COVID-related deaths and 1.4% for excess deaths. And then for women, it was 0.58% and then 0.77% for excess deaths. And as demonstrated by the graphs on the right, as age increases, so does the IFR for COVID-related deaths and from excess deaths. The potential biases that could have been introduced into the study were selection bias and observation bias. The individuals chosen may over or underrepresent a certain population based on their location. Additionally, there was no blinding done in the study. Therefore, individuals that were chosen for the study could have changed their behaviors, which would influence the results. This would include doing things like wearing masks more often and be more diligent about social distancing. This study did have a few limitations. It didn't include individuals from long-term care facilities, which accounted for a large number of COVID-related deaths. This could result in over or underestimating the infection fatality risk. This limitation was accounted for in the methods by subtracting those nursing home-related deaths reportedly from COVID-19 or excess deaths. This population was extremely vulnerable, and nursing homes may have underreported these deaths in the beginning. This would have resulted in an overestimation of IFR. The major conclusions of this study were that the infection fatality risk for COVID-19 was between 0.83 and 1.07%. In the oldest group, an estimated 12 to 16% of infected men and 5 to 6% of infected women died in Spain during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. This information has widespread application and supports the idea that the existing measures, such as wearing face coverings and social distancing, should be used as to primarily shield particularly vulnerable groups from infection.